Hello, Lori and Android app development classmates. Hope you all are doing well, and congratulations on reaching this point in the semester. This is your fellow classmate, Matt Hill, coming at you here with a walkthrough of sorts of my Capstone project. Had an ambitious proposal for this final project, and it certainly has lived up to its suspected reputation here. My premise for my project was to create a way for someone who is using a Google map on their Android device to fetch directions to also be able to see whether or not they're driving into inclement weather. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a Google map layer with directions with a polyline that kind of follows your proposed route, and overlaid on top of that, there would be a weather map that could kind of show you what the weather patterns are looking like near that route. So that, yeah, you could see up ahead, oh my gosh, 20 minutes from now, I'm driving into a snowstorm or a thunderstorm or whatever it happens to be. And then drivers could react more responsibly and pull off and let it pass or try to find a new route, etc. That said, this was a very, very challenging assignment, and unfortunately, I don't have a completely finished working product to demo for you. Google has a lot of documentation, and Android has a lot of documentation about Google Maps. Unfortunately, not all of it is written in a way that I am able to easily understand. So I'm just going to show you what I have here, and you can kind of deduce the rest. Now, I did follow some walkthrough tutorials to do some kind of fun things regarding login for my app. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if people could have their own accounts and it would save, to a Firebase database, a Firestore database, which is NoSQL, their login information as well as their most recently queried trips. So I did set some of that up, and then I also have, let's see, where to begin? Why don't we just jump into our main activity? So the first thing we have to do is ask the user whether it's okay to use their location. We got to make sure they have Google Play services installed. If they don't, we got to tell them they can't make map requests. If they do have it installed, but it's not the right version, we can prompt them to fix that error. And basically, that before we get to that, that's going to initiate the first boot up here is going to initiate the login activity. So, we're getting them registered with Firebase, and basically taking in their username, the password. Assuming that all checks out, we pass them along to the onStart method. So we're registering a new email. We are making sure that all registers with Firestore successfully. And then we redirect them to the login screen after that. And then they log in, and then they get to the actual activity. So my apologies, I had those mixed up there for a second. So yeah, register and then log in. And then basically we come to our map activity. And so the main activity is going to take in an origin and a destination, and that can be a string. It could be a zip code. It could be a city-state. It could be a street address with a city-state and or a zip code. Google has an amazing way of geocoding and reverse geocoding that information. So they can translate those strings into lat-long points, and then we can then add that to a map as an origin and a destination and draw a polyline in between the two. And we pass those strings, that information, to our map activity, which, there's a few different things with location permissions. I really wanted this app to be able to recognize, enforce the user to have location services turned on, and then make sure that their location populates as a potential origin choice. And unfortunately, I just couldn't get that to go. I followed, as I mentioned, some different walkthrough tutorials, and none of them seemed to get them to work for my particular case. But we do, we have some logging in here. We kind of tell our own application, when is the map initializing, etc. So we're getting location permissions. We're making sure, as you'll see, once a user registers and they log in, it's going to ask them, is it okay to use your location? And they have to say yes. And that's as far as we got, as far as being able to recognize the location of that user. Unfortunately, I just wasn't able to get to zoom the map to where they are. Now, if you put in your origin, the map will zoom to the origin location. So on map ready, this is kind of the bread and butter here. We grab our route start and our route end. This is the different strings that the user typed in on the first page, the main activity. And we're going to start fetching directions. First, I do this a couple different ways. One, we, kind of geocode the lat long of the origin and the destination and create our starting address and our ending address out of that. And from that, we can, grab the latitude and the longitude. And I populate origin coordinates and destination coordinates as kind of our official origin and destination lat longs that we then use to place markers on the map later. But there's a different way that I went about it as well, which is fetching directions. And for whatever reason, I can't seem to get it to play nicely. I have this Google Maps controller object, and basically where I'm looking right now is, don't get too distracted here, I'll explain this in a second. We have our route path. So this Google Maps controller object is a bunch of logic that's going to make an official request to Google Maps to fetch directions between the route start and the route end. And it's going to return a directions result. And from that directions result, you got to drill down into that a little bit, but there's this thing called an overview polyline, and it returns to us an encoded path that in theory is a string value that it represents all of the different lat longs that are at the start and end of each step in your path. So I'm going to go down the street 2 blocks, and then I'm going to take a right. And so it's returning not only my origin lat long, but then when I'm taking a right, what is my lat long when I'm taking that right? And then I go down the street a little further, and I take a left. What is my lat long when I take a left? And so at each of those little steps, they call them, there's lat long information there. And that encoded path is supposedly a string that represents all of those different points. And they make you do a little rigmarole with decoding and re-encoding that path into a list of lat longs that then gets added to a polyline that gets added to the map. And that polyline is then supposed to hug the roadbed and show you all the different roads that you're going to be following, roughly. And that's what all of this logic is supposed to be. Unfortunately, as you'll see, doesn't work. Again, not sure why. This is the kind of development experience that I am learning just takes a lot of trial and error and time to flesh out what's working and what isn't, and why isn't it working. And had I implemented even more logging, that I could probably get to the bottom of it sooner. But there's lots of different elements to this here. And that being said, I did find a way to draw a line between the origin and the destination. So as you'll see, we put our markers on our origin marker and our destination marker on the map. We move our camera to hover over the origin at a reasonable zoom level, 8F. I think it's on a scale of 1 to 20, 20 being the most zoomed in. So, and then we take our current route, which is it's declared up above as a, jumped off my map activity here. It's declared up above as an options, or actually just as a polyline. And then we populate that polyline with our info. We're basically just drawing a straight line as the crow flies, unfortunately, between our origin and our destination. We tell it how thick we want the line to be. We tell it we want it to be the letter or the color red, and we go from there. So you'll see that in a second. Now the whole idea for the next step which also is still in development, is generating an HTTP request for a weather map. NOAA was the original group. That's like the North American weather.gov folks. Let's see if I can pull it up here. I guess I don't have it up anymore. NOAA KML radar. So there is a way, in theory, to import a KML or KMZ layer to Google Maps, and that is this. There's a whole bunch of different radar options. Now, I'm not able to figure out how their API works. I've been playing around on here quite a bit, looking around for APIs, etc., like what the GET request call would be, because as you can see, they've got single image loops, again, in the KML format or KMZ format. They have single images, and the whole idea would have been query your origin, your destination, and maybe some spots along the way, and choose your, maybe you just want to base it off of the state that you're driving through. Maybe you want to base it off of multiple radars, multiple images, if it's a long distance road trip. And then you would query each of those radar stations and approximate the time that you would be passing near where they would be collecting data for you. Again, unfortunately, even though this is free and provided by our government, I was not able to get this to play nicely. Was in the middle of working on this wonderful site provided by University of Iowa State, Iowa State University. So I'm just going to punch that in here. So these guys have really cool weather radar and an API to work with. So this was kind of the GET request here that I was working with or about to work with. Still a lot of trial and error to get this to play nicely. The goal here, basically Android has its own rules for making GET requests. So you have to create this volley. An easy way to do it, Android suggests, or at least the Maps API suggests, is create this volley object, which then has a request queue, and you tell it what your URL, your GET URL is going to be. You anchor your coordinates for that GET request. I was going to use the origin coordinates, and then you fetch your response, which when you look at it in SOAP UI, this is that same string right here. And I had fetched it, and it returns, as you can see, a ping image right here, which is exactly what I want, at least to start with. Ideally, it'd be a series of ping images that I loop through, or a PNG, whatever you want to call it. Unfortunately, it's, for some reason, not playing nicely in Android. These listener and error listener objects are not playing nicely, and I'm still diagnosing why that is. The idea being then that you convert the bitmap, the radar image, if you follow these instructions, you can ground overlay this image, as you can set this image to be a ground overlay for your map. And I was trying to follow this example that they have on the Google APIs for Android site. And again, unfortunately, just not working so hot. So I'm going to comment all of this out. And then in theory, we should at least be able to see the very beginnings of what I was getting at here. And hopefully you can see the value in why I chose this as a project. I mean, I came up with this idea originally when I was driving to Nebraska in January a couple years ago, and we had queried our directions on Google Maps, but had no idea that we were driving straight into a snowstorm on I-80, and had to pull off on the side of the road as semis were whipping past us in near whiteout conditions. And I thought to myself, boy, it would have been nice to know that, but just by looking at the Google map, what we were driving into. So as you can see, we've got roadway radar booting up here. It's prompting us to log in or to register, and we are going to register as a new user. and we can register as Android apps is awesome at hotmail.com, and password is let's just say Android apps are awesome. Okay, and Android apps are awesome. Register. And that is communicating with Firebase. As you can see, it says authenticated as, that's a short toast, but authenticated as Android apps. All right, so here we are inside of our main activity, and it's asking us about our trip. So we're just going to type in, I'm just going to go with a zip code 53536. That's Evansville, Wisconsin. That's where I live. And let's go to Madison. Fitchburg area. We'll go to 53711. And we'll hit get directions and forecast, and it's prompting us we want to access this device's location, allow only while using the app, and boom, there we are. We're zoomed in. The on-map ready function has been called, and goodness, my scrolling got a little carried away there. Let's try to find where we are here. Scrolling around too much. So the line is drawn, and for some reason, our markers aren't showing up. Probably because I commented it out, huh? That would be my guess. Let's see here. I put them way down here, so let's probably would prefer it if I go up here with it. So let's try that one more time. Rebooting, and again, we're authenticated with Android apps. And we're going, let's go 53536 to a different zip code. Let's try 53704 and get directions and forecast. And there we are. We've got our origin and our destination. And in theory, we would be seeing a weather radar map right here, but and also a polyline that hugs the roadbed. With a little bit more time and effort, I'm sure I could get this figured out. That is kind of the key lesson here, I think, is that app development is never completely finished. There's always more to be done, more to be improved. And I have definitely learned a great deal in attempting this ambitious project. I look forward to continuing to increase my skills and fluency with especially the Google Maps and Google for Android SDK. And I really appreciate everything that Lori has taught us and learning from all of you as well. Wishing you all the best on great success going forward with your app development careers in the future here. Thank you for watching.